The divorce papers were already signed by the time Corinna found out that the company dismantling her husband's family legacy was hers. Not partially hers, not hers through some distant trust she'd forgotten about. Hers through a holding structure she had built quietly over 11 years, beginning the year before she ever met Hadley Ashworth. But on the morning Hadley slid those papers across the kitchen island, his mother standing in the doorway of the breakfast room like she had personally arranged the lighting, Corinna didn't say any of that. She picked up the pen. She signed her name, and she left. That was a Tuesday in late February, the kind of cold that settles into the bones of anyone who has spent a winter in Ontario. The trees on their street, the street she had chosen, the house she had found, the mortgage she had co-signed on a salary Hadley once called respectable for what you do, were bare and grey against a sky the colour of old concrete. She drove to her office. She poured herself a coffee. She sat at her desk for a long time before she opened her laptop. Corinna Selby Ashworth was 37 years old and had been the quiet majority shareholder of Meridian Bridge Capital for 6 of the 11 years she had been married to Hadley Ashworth, 41, regional vice president of Ashworth and Crane Holdings, the family firm his grandfather had built and his father had expanded, and which Hadley had, by most accounts, simply occupied. She had not kept it a secret to deceive him. She had kept it separate because she had learned, very early in their marriage, that Hadley had a particular way of absorbing things that belonged to other people. He did it with her ideas first. Small ones. She would mention over dinner that she thought the neighborhood needed a better pharmacy. And 3 weeks later, he would tell his friends that he had been thinking about how underserved that corner of the market was. She would suggest a route for a road trip, and he would describe it to his mother as a plan he had been developing. It was not malicious, she eventually decided. It was simply how he moved through the world, gathering, incorporating, claiming, without ever noticing that the things he gathered had come from somewhere else. So when Meridian Bridge began to grow, when the small private lending firm she had co-founded with her university friend Priya became something real and consequential, Corinna kept the two parts of her life in separate compartments. She was careful. She was patient. She was, as Hadley's mother Eugenie once said at a family dinner, in a tone that was meant to be complimentary, very good at staying in the background. Corinna had smiled and passed the bread. Hadley's affair with Raquel, 34, event coordinator, introduced to the Ashworth family through a charity gala that Eugenie had organized, had been going on for approximately 14 months before Corinna knew about it with certainty. She had suspected it for perhaps 4 of those months. She had hoped she was wrong for the other 10. She was not wrong. She found out the way most people do. Not dramatically, not through a confession or a confrontation, but through a small mundane detail that didn't fit. A receipt for a restaurant she had never been to, on a night Hadley had said he was in Barrie for a client dinner. She looked at it for a long moment, then folded it along its original crease and put it back exactly where she had found it. She did not say anything that night. She made pasta. She asked about his day. She listened to him describe a property dispute with a contractor in Vaughan and thought about what she needed to do next. Over the following 6 weeks, she met twice with her lawyer, once with Priya, and once, very briefly, over coffee near Union Station, with a man named Douglas, who was the acting CFO of a firm she had been watching for 3 years. The conversation with Douglas lasted 40 minutes and resulted, 3 months later, in Meridian Bridge Capital, acquiring a controlling interest in Ashworth and Crane Holdings through a subsidiary that did not carry her name. She did not do this to punish Hadley. She did it because it was the right business decision. Ashworth and Crane was asset-rich and structurally unstable, carrying debt that had been mismanaged for the better part of a decade and running on relationships that were aging out of relevance. It was, as Priya put it during one of their Tuesday morning calls, a beautiful building with a cracked foundation. Someone is going to buy it. Better someone careful. Corinna was careful. The morning of the divorce, she woke before Hadley. She made coffee in the French press he never used, but she had always preferred. She stood at the kitchen window and watched a cardinal land on the snow-covered fence post at the edge of the yard and then lift off again, like it had remembered somewhere more important to be. When she heard him come downstairs, she poured him a mug without being asked. He sat at the island. He was wearing the grey Henley she had bought him 2 Christmases ago. He looked, she thought, like a man who had been rehearsing something and was now slightly afraid of his own lines. "I've been thinking," he started. "I know," she said. He looked at her. "I haven't said anything yet." "I know," she said again. He looked away first. Eugenie arrived 20 minutes later. She did not knock. She had not knocked in 11 years, and Corinna had long since stopped mentioning it. She came in through the side door with the particular energy of someone who has been asked to witness something. and has arrived early to make sure the staging is correct. She sat at the kitchen table. She arranged her coat over the back of the chair. She looked at Corinna in a way that was almost, but not quite, sympathetic. "This is the right decision," Eugenie said. "For everyone." Corinna looked at her mother-in-law for a long moment. "You mean for Hadley?" she said. Eugenie's expression didn't change. "I mean for everyone." The papers were in a folder that Hadley had brought down from his office. Corinna read every page before she signed anything, which made Hadley visibly uncomfortable and made Eugenie check her phone twice. When she finished, she signed where her lawyer had already told her to sign, stood up, picked up her bag, and walked to the door. "Corinna," Hadley said from behind her. She turned. He looked like he wanted to say something that would make this feel less like what it was. She waited to see if he would find the words. He didn't. She left. The Ashworth and Crane situation became public knowledge approximately 6 weeks after the divorce was finalized. It came out the way these things often do in a mid-sized company, slowly, then all at once. First, there were rumors about the debt restructuring, then a meeting of the board that ran 3 hours longer than scheduled. Then a notice to stakeholders that the firm's primary lender had changed, and that the new ownership structure would be formally communicated at an upcoming general meeting. Hadley called her on a Thursday evening. She was in her kitchen in the apartment she had rented near Roncesvalles, smaller than the house, quieter, full of light in the mornings, and she let it ring twice before she answered. "There are some things happening with the firm," he said. "I know," she said. A pause. "How do you know?" She didn't answer that. "The board is talking about a restructuring," he said. "Someone bought out the primary lender. Nobody seems to know who. There's a name on the filing. Meridian something, but I can't find any information on who's behind it." She said nothing. "Corinna," Hadley, another pause. "Is this you?" She took a breath. "I think you should talk to your lawyer before the general meeting," she said. "There are going to be some changes to the board composition." He was quiet for a very long time. "By what authority?" he started, and then stopped. "The filing is on record," she said. "Meridian Bridge Capital holds controlling interest as of last month. It's all documented." She could hear him breathing. "This is Corinna. This is my family's company." "I know," she said, "which is why I intend to run it carefully." She didn't say it coldly. She didn't say it warmly either. She said it the way she said most things, clearly, quietly, without performing the emotion he was waiting for. He hung up first. The general meeting was held on a Wednesday morning at the Ashworth and Crane offices on Bay Street, in a boardroom Corinna had been in exactly once before, years ago, when Hadley had asked her to come to a holiday party, and she had sat quietly in the corner with a glass of sparkling water, and made conversation with people who forgot her name by the time they reached the coat check. She came in with Priya and with the firm's legal counsel, a woman named Hadassah, who wore excellent suits and spoke in the kind of measured cadence that made opposing parties feel correctly that every word she said had been considered in advance. Hadley was already in the room. So was Eugenie, which was not required, and which Corinna had not anticipated, but which she also, on some level, understood. Eugenie had always been most present when there was something to witness. Raquel was not there. This was, Corinna thought, probably for the best. Hadley looked at her when she walked in. He looked at Priya. He looked at Hadassah. He looked back at Corinna with an expression that cycled through several things very quickly. Disbelief, calculation, something that might have been a beginning of understanding. "You can't be serious," Eugenie said from the far end of the table. Corinna sat down. She opened the folder in front of her and glanced at the first page, though she already knew every word on it. "The acquisition was completed through Meridian Bridge Capital's subsidiary holding, which I can confirm for the record has been operational for 3 years, she said. "The terms of the restructuring have been shared with your board. We are not here to dissolve the firm. We're here to stabilize it." She looked up. "Which is what I have been trying to do in various ways for most of the last decade." No one said anything. Eugenie opened her mouth. Then she closed it. "By what right?" Hadley said finally, his voice lower than she expected. "Are you sitting at this table?" Corinna looked at him. She thought about the kitchen island and the folder of papers and the grey Henley and the cardinal that had lifted off the fence post and found somewhere better to be. "Ownership," she said. One word. She let it sit in the room. The restructuring took 14 months. Corinna did not move back into the house on that quiet street in Etobicoke. She stayed in the apartment near Roncesvalles, where the light came in well in the mornings and where she had learned to make a sourdough starter that Priya called aggressively competent, which was, Corinna thought, probably an accurate description of her in general. She did not speak to Hadley outside of board-related matters, and even those conversations were mediated through Hadassah and the firm's communications protocol. She was not unkind about it. She was not warm about it either. She was, as she had always been, clear. Eugenie sent a card in October, no message inside, just her name, signed in the same looping script she used for everything, as if she had been about to write something and then thought better of it. Corinna put it on the windowsill in her kitchen for a day, then recycled it. Raquel and Hadley's relationship, she understood from Priya, who understood it from various people in overlapping social circles, did not survive the winter. She was not surprised by this. She was not glad about it either, or not in the way she might have expected to be. What she felt mostly was a kind of stillness, like the specific quiet that comes after a long sound finally stops. She had loved Hadley once. She had loved the version of him she had first met at a fundraiser in the distillery district 10 years ago, when he had laughed at something she said and looked at her like she was the most interesting person in the room. She had spent several years trying to find that person again, inside the one she had ended up married to, the way you sometimes flip through an old book, looking for an annotation you're certain you made. She had eventually accepted that some things are not lost, but simply never been what you thought they were. The firm held its first post-restructuring shareholder dinner in March, 14 months after the general meeting on Bay Street. Corinna wore a navy dress she had bought in January and had not been looking for when she found it. She arrived early, which she always did. She spoke to the board members she had come to know over the preceding year, most of whom had, with varying degrees of speed, moved through surprise and skepticism, and arrived, finally, at something like respect. The venue was a room in a hotel near the waterfront, with tall windows and a view of the lake, which was still frozen at the edges and dark grey toward the center. She stood near one of those windows with a glass of wine she was not really drinking and looked out at the water. Hadley arrived late. He was alone. He looked, she thought, like someone who had spent the better part of a year slowly understanding something that had taken a very long time to arrive. He came to stand near her, but not beside her, close enough to speak without being overheard. "You could have told me," he said, "about Meridian Bridge, about any of it." She considered this. "You weren't asking," she said. "That's not." He stopped. He seemed to decide something. "I didn't know you were doing anything like that." "I know," she said. He was quiet for a moment. "Did you always know? About where this was going?" She turned to look at him then, properly. "No," she said. "I didn't know about Raquel for a long time. I wanted to be wrong." He nodded slowly, as if he was adding this to a tally of things he was learning to sit with. "The firm is doing better," he said eventually. "The Q1 numbers, I've seen them," she said. "Right," he exhaled. "Of course you have." A board member approached her then with a question about the spring financing cycle, and Corinna excused herself and turned to answer it. By the time the conversation ended, Hadley had moved to the other side of the room. She did not watch him go. She turned back to the window. The lake was still and dark and very wide, and the lights of the far shore were small and steady, and the ice at the edges was holding just barely against the first almost warmth of early spring. She had built something real. She had protected it. She had walked away from a kitchen island on a Tuesday morning in February, and she had not looked back, not because she was cold, but because she had already decided. Long before the papers, long before Raquel, long before the general meeting on Bay Street, that the life she was going to live was going to be one she had chosen, and she had chosen this one. She picked up her wine glass, drank what was left of it, set it down, and went to find Priya.